Hello and welcome to Cafe DC. I'm your host Faiz Rahman. Today we are at the house of a famous Pakistani American couple, Rifat and Shaista Mahmood. They have done some great work for the Pakistani American community as well as Pakistan, and they're known for their parties and their functions. Tonight, we're going to show you a special interview at their house with Congressman Jim Moran, who's with us tonight, and he will talk to you about his coming retirement and his passion for the Pakistani American community, and of course, about the hosts, Shaista and Rifat Mahmood. So, Congressman Jim Moran. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us at such a short notice. You just happened to be here at this event, at this great event. There are members of Congress, there are ambassadors, and of course, Shaista and Rifat, they're very famous, very well known for having these parties. And every time I come to this house, I always find you here. And when I read the news of your retirement, that you're planning to retire later this year, the first name which sprang to my mind was Rifat's name, because you've been so close to him. So please let us know first about your retirement. Why at such a young age, and while you're doing so well, you want to retire?
It was a difficult decision to make. I love this job. I love serving in the U.S. Congress. But the institution itself is dysfunctional today. The Congress is like a board of directors for the country. And when you have a board of directors who doesn't want the company to succeed, you've got a problem. And the fact is that we have too many members of the Congress who really want the government to fail because they don't believe in government. They have this attitude that they can be self-sufficient without the government. It's largely a point of view that has been funded, promoted by corporate interests, extraction industries, the oil and gas industry, mining companies, and people who are simply greedy. They don't want government regulation. They don't want to have to pay taxes. And so they funded media, political people, gotten them elected so that they will vote against taxes and vote against government regulation. And that's the principal reason that they're here. And I strongly disagree with them. I think that government works best when it works in cooperation with the private sector. I think one of the reasons why America's economy is as strong as it is because we have had an investment on the part of government in education, in training, in the physical infrastructure of this country, the roads and the bridges and the utility system. And so we have a difference in ideas and philosophy. Frankly, I think I can do more outside of the Congress than within the institution today.
Well, Congressman, what you said is basically they have been printed, published in newspapers. They've been talk shows on these allegations about some of these members of Congress. Mm-hmm. But this is also basically a view of the Democratic Party. You know, most Democrats, at least a few Democrats in Congress, and you're of course one of them, seem to believe that. But do you think it also has to do something with the unpopularity of Congress? I mean, the popularity right now is at 7%, and people are just trying to figure out what's wrong with the people that they elect to serve and run the functions of this massive government. Having said that, however, of course, but don't you think there's also a lot of wastage in the government? The government, the Republicans believe that it has gotten so big, so huge, that it's just, they're just trying to self-perpetuate themselves rather than serving the people. And that's why they want to cut the expenses and they cut the government, some of those programs that they don't believe in.
No, I don't agree with you, Fez. I know that's what people think.
Especially the Republican
The Republicans want us to believe that. We have a $16 trillion economy, and we just passed a bill to fund the entire government, which was $1 trillion. That's not a disproportionate share of our wealth. And in fact, we would have more equity, more opportunity for more citizens of this country if we invested more in the physical and the human infrastructure of this country. But the government has to do that, and the people with the greatest wealth need to be willing to share some of that through a fair system of taxation. We have as bad income inequality today as we had during the Great Depression of the 1920s and 1930s. Wealth is concentrated, particularly among the top 1%. And we have a tax code that taxes them less than the average working American.
There were talks about having one flat rate for everybody, and that would have, in their opinion, would have eliminated some of this inequality. Did you agree with that idea?
Absolutely not. That's an idea that seems simplistic, that seems simple, which is simplistic and wrong. Why should someone who is working 40 hours a week, scrubbing floors or painting houses or in difficult labor, just barely making enough money to provide for their family, have to pay 25% of their income when billionaires who have more money than they know what to do with pay the same percentage? No, I believe in a progressive system of taxation, one that is not confiscatory, one that has a sufficient incentive for people to accumulate wealth and to work hard and to invest their money and to save it. But I certainly believe that we should give opportunity to everyone. And the fact is, the working class pays more taxes as a percentage of their income than the economic elite, who pay less taxes because they don't pay taxes on earned income. It's all on unearned income, capital gains and dividends and the like, which is taxed at a lower percentage.
Congressman, obviously you're very passionate about your positions, and you've been known to be very vocal, not just on domestic issues, but also on foreign policy issues. You were born in Buffalo, raised in Massachusetts, and then of course you've been here for a long time. So, you're from the eastern side of the United States, and there's certain left element, and of course you don't be ever shy of, pronouncing yourself as a leftist or as a liberal politician.
I'm a liberal. I'm not necessarily a leftist. I try to be a common sense citizen of the world. And that's what we all should be. We should be citizens of the world and respect other people's point of view, their religions, their cultures. But I am a liberal, because liberal means being open-minded. It means being willing to care about other people and knowing that government has a role in any culture that is a strong progressive culture, and that we are willing to invest in children for the future. That's being a liberal.
Absolutely.
And I'm a proud liberal.
Absolutely. But the Republicans, the conservatives, of course, they're also proud of their positions.
Yeah.
They, especially those who believe in social conservatism, or of course, fiscal conservatism, but they come up, and when they come out, they say, the liberals, everything goes for them. They're open to all kinds of ideas which, in their opinion, are not pro-family or pro-society, and some, they see some degradation in the thinking and overall actions in the society. So, but my point is, don't you think in Congress, the main virtue should be the compromise? Yes, of course, we have conservatives on one side, liberals on one side, but to move things forward, why can't we come to some kind of a compromise to move country forward?
Well, I do think that we should compromise. And I have spent more than 20 years compromising. In fact, when I was mayor of the city of Alexandria, Virginia, I had 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and I was an independent. I do believe in compromise, but I don't think you need to compromise your principles. I think you need to have sufficient respect for other points of view, that you move the ball forward, maybe not as far as you would like to, but you reach an agreement. But in the Congress, you really need people who believe in the government, who don't want the government to fail. Now, you know, using the analogy of a board of directors, on many boards of directors, people will say, well, let's conserve our money and not take a risk. Others will say, let's take a risk because it means more profit, things like that. But they all believe in the company, or they wouldn't be on the board of directors. Problem we have today is that we have a board of directors, too many of whom don't believe
it's a
in
massive
this country.
Board of directors.
They're not willing to invest.
435 members. That's a massive, very huge board. Yeah. Okay. Congressman, we just want to take a very short break here. And when we come back, we'll talk about your positions on foreign policy issues. Yeah. You've been very vocal, sometimes harshly critical of both Obama and the previous administration, the Bush administrations. Yes. So please stay with us. We'll be right back on the issues of foreign policy with Congressman Jim Moran. Each week here at Cafe DC, I go one-on-one. Politicians, literary giants, activists, power brokers, and many more from different walks of life. And focusing on what matters is my cup of, shall we say, coffee. Matters that make a difference in the society. Watch me, Faiz Rahman, on Cafe DC, every week only on PTV World. Welcome back. Okay, Congressman, before we left for a short break, we were talking about some foreign policy issues. Yes. Let's start with the war in Iraq. Yes. 2003. Yes. You were very critical of that war. And you had and you made it so public. What do you think? And in the hindsight, of course, when it's 2020, a lot of people now tend to agree with your previous position. What do you think went wrong?
Well, what went wrong is that we elected a president who knew nothing about foreign policy, and he brought in a group of neocons that his father wouldn't listen to. These were people who were focused on an agenda that I don't think was in the best interests of the United States. It may have been in the best interests of other allies, but not of the United States. And I think none of them had been to war themselves, but they were too trigger happy to send our men and women in uniform to war for their agenda. It was poorly
But you don't
thought
believe
out.
that President Bush himself knowingly acted against the interest of the country?
I don't think President Bush knew any better. You know, 6 months into the war, he had a group of Iraqi Americans in to discuss the war, and they started talking about the conflict between the Sunnis and the Shia, and he had to ask, well, what's a Sunni and what's a Shia? What does that have to do with the Iraq war? He was guided by people who had their own agenda and knew that he was flexible because he had not gained the wisdom and knowledge that his father had.
But Saddam Hussein was a threat to the
To
region,
who?
at least to the region.
Saddam Hussein was no threat to the United States, and my belief was that the only winner of the Iraq war ultimately would be Iran, because the majority of the people of Iraq were Shia. And that's why George Bush's father, George H.W. Bush, did not go into Baghdad, because the United States had supported Saddam Hussein because they knew he was the bulwark between the creation of really a Shia swath, if you will, the resurrection of the Persian Empire, which, you know, I don't have as much of a problem with the Persian Empire as many people do, but there was legitimate concern if Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and Iraq were all controlled by the same forces.
Same group or same, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, But of course, this is still a very dividing issue in this country. There are people who are still writing about this. Fareed Zakaria, in the Post, he wrote a column about U.S. intervention in this area and how it changed the whole landscape. And of course, he probably tends to side with your opinion more than anybody else's.
He's a wise man. I gain much of my insight by reading Fareed Zakaria.
So, but there. I don't want to go into too much detail on this war because it's a short program. But there are people who genuinely believe that was the right thing to do, especially on the conservative side, the Republicans, some of them. And there is a very strong opinion that whatever President Bush did, he acted out of a good heart and for the best interest of the United States and its allies.
He gave information to the American people that was false. There's no excuse for that. And that's the only reason he got the justification.
You're talking about the weapons of mass destruction.
Of course. There weren't any weapons of mass destruction, and we knew there were not.
I have attended some of your programs on Pakistan and about South Asia. And on that, true to your character, you've been very vocal, sometimes very harsh for the policies that those governments in South Asia pursue. What you think is going on as a very close observer of those of that region?
Well, a lot is going on. I wish that the U.S. Congress was more engaged, but foreign policy in the United States is determined by domestic politics. That's the reality. And so we will stay in Afghanistan as long as there's public support. If the president doesn't explain why we need to be in Afghanistan, that public support will wane, and we're going to pull out. But we will also pull out if we can see no purpose to the money being spent. A lot of people see no purpose to the money we've spent in Afghanistan. In fact, they see little purpose for the money we've spent in Pakistan. And there's reason for that. Because the majority of Pakistanis think about the United States the way that the United States thinks about the Congress. 94% of them disapprove of the United States. Well, then why are we giving $15 billion to Pakistan of taxpayers' money if all they do...
And so is Afghanistan, by the way. So is the case in Afghanistan.
Of course.
Afghans,
the Afghans don't want us. Now the Hazaras want us, and some of the Tajiks and so on, but the Pashtun
Congressman,
do not.
Coming back to your point that, the domestic situation, the public opinion drives foreign policy agenda. Republicans especially, and a lot of actually Afghans, also accuse President Obama and his administration for not selling the war properly to the American public. They haven't done a good job of convincing the importance and the significance of their presence in that region. Do you think, is it something...
No, I'm not going to be critical of President Obama because it's a tough sell. When President Karzai starts campaigning for re-election by criticizing the very hand that feeds him, you have to say, well, what's this all about? Why are we giving all this money to President Karzai and his administration, much of which stays with them and winds up in Dubai?
Yeah, he's not. He says he's not going to sign the BSA, the bilateral.
If he doesn't sign the bilateral security agreement, then the $85 billion that we have set aside for the Afghan war in the budget we just passed this week will not go to Afghanistan. And unfortunately, Afghanistan will implode. And that's going to cause severe political and economic disruption to Pakistan as well. It is not in Pakistan's interest or Afghanistan's interest to have the United States withdraw. Now, the people on the street may think that because I've been over there and I'm going over there again next month for 14 days, but you read the newspapers.
Pakistan
and,
as well?
Huh?
Pakistan as well, or just Afghanistan?
Yes, I'll be in Pakistan and Afghanistan with the leadership of the Defense Appropriations Committee, the committee that funds the money. But you read the papers, and it's just all anti-U.S. And you talk to many of the legislators, and they think every bad thing that happens in their lives is somehow the fault of the CIA, it seems. You know, what's that about? The fact is we need to cooperate. And the families who are educated and who are expected to be leaders and have the capacity to be taxed and to build up a public school system and to get Pakistan as an economic leader in the 21st century, those families need to understand they need to engage with the United States. Because if they turn to other countries for help, those other countries want something in return. And that's something that they're going to want in return is not consistent with in many cases, with Pakistan's long-term interests.
Congressman, here we'll again take one little break and then come back and talk to you about your coming visit. Are you going to talk to Karzai about the BSA, and do you think you will have some influence on him before you depart? So we'll be right back after this short break. Thank you. Each week here at Cafe DC, I go one-on-one. Politicians, literary giants, activists, power brokers, and many more from different walks of life. And focusing on what matters is my cup of, shall we say, coffee. Matters that make a difference in the society. Watch me, Faiz Rahman, on Cafe DC, every week only on PTV World. Thank you for staying with us. This is Faiz Rahman and you're watching Cafe DC. Please don't forget to visit our website as well, urduvoa.com. And back to Congressman Jim Moran. Congressman, again, about your visit. You just announced that you will be in Pakistan as well as in Afghanistan for 14 days. Mm-hmm. And BSA is a big sticking point right now between the United States and Afghanistan. And of course, it's going to affect the entire region. It's not a bilateral issue, it's a multilateral issue. So do you think you will have a meeting with President Karzai, and would you have some influence on him? Can you convince him?
Oh, I expect we'll be meeting with President Karzai. I've met with him a number of times in the past. I don't know that I'll have any influence upon him. I need to, the show is wrapping up. I think I was supposed to be done. I'm supposed to be introducing.
Well, here comes our host Carson, reminding you that,
yes,
you're
it's her house,
exactly,
so we really
absolutely.
ought to pay attention to it. So I guess what I would suggest is that in all religions, there is this concept, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
So universal value.
Yes. So maybe the question we need to ask of President Karzai, if you were the United States, would you give you money when you
billions
complain?
And hundreds of billions of dollars?
Hundreds of billions. It'll cost $1 trillion for our engagement in Afghanistan with no thanks, no appreciation, and really little respect for the fact that the United States has been willing to give that to Afghanistan without asking anything in return other than you build up your school system, you empower women, you have
security forces, police,
you have fair elections, you have professional police who are not going to rip everyone off or who are not corrupt, that you in fact control corruption, that some of the billions of dollars we give you, you actually distribute to some of the people in need. That's all we want. We don't want anything in return other than what is in the benefit of the Afghan people. You're never going to find another country who will take that attitude, except for maybe the Scandinavian countries and maybe a few of the European countries. But none of the countries who are anxious to help Afghanistan, they want something in return. And so if he blows it and he doesn't, now I'm sympathetic to the fact that he wants, if there are crimes committed by American soldiers, he wants them prosecuted, prosecutable within Afghanistan. I can understand that, and that's a difficult issue on both sides, but that's understandable. But if he's asking for too much, and if he's not willing to do the kinds of things that we both know are in the long-term interest of the Afghan people, then the U.S. pulls out. And then good luck, because frankly, it's going to be a very bad situation. And I really fear that the Taliban will either take over the country or establish a Pashtunistan, which would be of a great threat to the stability of Pakistan, obviously.
Congressman, I wish we could go on. We've been reminded by our host that we need to go back and have some delicious food, I guess, before we listen to some speeches. But thank you very much
for... One of the best things about being a congressman, you get to eat. You get grades
absolutely, absolutely. But you have kept yourself fit and healthy.
I'm big, old, and fat.
But you're a big guy. You're a big guy.
That's me. Yeah, but I never get a chance to box or play football anymore, so it's all for naught. But it's been very nice to be with you, Fez. Thank you. Thank you for your interest, and it's been a privilege to be on your show.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Jim Moran. It's really a privilege to be with him at this location. He's a great friend of the Pakistani American community, great friend of Pakistan's, and he's going there. So let's see, what he accomplishes there, and we see some changes after that. So, thank you very much for watching Cafe DC. This is your host Faiz Rahman. See you next week.